Today we'll be looking at the COLAMY Velia. Now COLAMY has really been making a name for themselves lately in the budget office chair market with chairs like the Atlas and the 5188, which are currently some of my favorite chairs under $300. The Velia is their latest offering in this price range, and after testing it for the past 2 weeks, I'm excited to share my thoughts with you. In this video, I'll be giving you my full review of the COLAMY Velia, breaking down everything I like about this chair, as well as the things that I didn't like, so by the end, you'll have a clear idea of whether this chair is going to be the right fit for you. But before we dive in, I just want to mention that COLAMY did send me this chair for review, but this video is not sponsored. They have no input on this review, and they're not seeing this video before you guys do. Also, I'm actually working with COLAMY to give away one of these chairs on the channel for their 6-year anniversary at the end of March. All you need to do is subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment about what makes your ideal office chair. But if you don't want to wait, I'll have links in the description to where you can buy this chair with some coupon codes to help you save some money. So with that out of the way, let's jump right into the review, starting with the design. Now right off the bat, you'll notice that the COLAMY Velia has a sleek, modern look. I have the coral color configuration that has this more kind of exotic looking upholstery on the seat. It has a really cool looking pattern that's bright and really pops. In my opinion, it definitely makes the chair stand out compared to most generic office chairs in this price range. Now if you prefer something a little bit more neutral, then they also have a regular black configuration with gray upholstery that's a bit more subdued. Overall, it's a good looking chair in my opinion. There's nothing too crazy and over the top, but it's versatile enough to fit in practically any setup, whether it's a professional office environment, home office, or even a gaming setup. I think COLAMY did a really nice job with the design on this one. When it comes to the materials and build quality, the Velia is built pretty well compared to most chairs in this price range, though it's not quite as robust as the Atlas, which really kind of sets the standard for build quality under $300. The chair is pretty much entirely made of plastic material, but does not feel cheap at all. Despite not using any metal components, it feels sturdy and durable while still being relatively lightweight. It uses a nylon base instead of the metal and nylon combination found on the Atlas, but it's still very dense and feels solid. The mesh quality on the backrest is decent, but nothing that'll wow you. As we'll get into later, the headrest and lumbar support do feel a bit cheap and flimsy, which is one of the weak points of the build. But overall, the chair is built really well and doesn't have any creaking or rattling issues that you often find in budget chairs. I expect this chair to easily last around 3 to 5 years without any issues, and it comes with a 3-year warranty, which is pretty good for a chair in this price range. And while the materials and build quality aren't quite as good as the Atlas, the Velia does have some standout features that actually make it more comfortable than the Atlas in certain areas. So depending on what features are important to you, it could actually make sense to choose the Velia over the Atlas. With that being said, let's talk about the actual comfort of the chair, starting with the seat. The seat uses a relatively firm pad with a good amount of give to it. I'd say it's about as firm as the Atlas. I find it very comfortable and supportive. Now I was using the Velia as my daily chair for about 2 weeks, and I could comfortably sit in this chair for 8+ hours a day with no issues at all. Personally, I really like the seat shape on the Velia. It's much flatter compared to the Atlas, which makes the sittable area feel a bit wider. The seat on the Atlas kind of tapers off at the edges, which can make the sittable area feel a bit smaller, but you don't have to deal with that issue on the Velia at all. Also, there are no hard frame edges, which makes it great for people who like to sit cross-legged or with one leg tucked underneath the other. The flatter seat shape also helps distribute your weight more evenly throughout the seat, and I didn't notice any bottoming out even after sitting in the chair for extended periods of time. The Velia has a seat pan depth adjustment feature that you can access by pulling the tab on the right side of the chair. This allows you to dial in the chair to your specific leg length. Now as a rule of thumb, you want to have your legs at a 90-degree angle and be able to fit 2 to 3 fingers of space between the front of the seat and the inside of your knee. Now one minor issue I have with this seat is that when you extend the seat pan all the way out, you can kind of feel a gap between the back of the seat and the backrest. This is especially noticeable when you're reclining, which can feel a bit uncomfortable. It's not as bad if you don't extend the seat pan all the way out, but could be an issue for taller people who really need that extra seat depth. This is definitely a drawback compared to the Atlas, which doesn't have this problem at all. Now despite this, I still really like the seat on the Velia overall. I think it's definitely one of the most comfortable seats I've used in a budget office chair. And in a lot of ways, I even prefer it over the Atlas because of the shape. My only issue is that seat pan gap, which isn't a problem at all on the Atlas. Now moving on to the backrest, the Velia has a nice natural lumbar curve to match the shape of your spine, and it feels very supportive. The shape of the frame also tapers in towards the top, which makes it so you can spread your arms and chest without crashing into it. The Velia uses a mesh backrest, but the mesh is different from what you'll find on the Atlas. It's more fabric-like mesh material instead of the more plastic-like material on the Atlas. It has pretty good elasticity, which provides good support and keeps you from sinking in too much and coming into contact with the hard plastic frame underneath. However, I did find the mesh to be a bit coarse to the touch. Now, it's not the biggest deal, but I think if you're someone who tends to wear loose woven clothing, you might find that it kind of catches a bit. It could also be uncomfortable if you're someone who tends to wear tank tops and have your bare skin rubbing up against it. But in most cases, it really hasn't been an issue issue for me. The frame is made of a dense plastic material. It's pretty rigid, so you don't get a ton of flex, but since the mesh is pretty springy, you don't really sink in too far, so I never really felt trapped in the chair. I could freely move around and shift positions throughout the day with no issues at all. Now, the Velia does come with an adjustable lumbar support, but to be honest, it's pretty terrible. It's a flimsy, cheap-feeling piece of plastic with no padding, and it's only height adjustable with no depth adjustment, and adjusting it feels pretty clunky as it tends to catch on either side when you're trying to move it up and down. In terms of how it feels, it's pretty non-existent. In fact, I barely even feel it at all. However, while the adjustable lumbar support isn't great, I personally don't even really think this chair needs it. The shape of the backrest already has a natural lumbar curve that feels very supportive in my opinion. The elasticity of the mesh also provides good enough support that I don't find myself needing any extra lumbar support. Personally, I actually prefer this over the Atlas lumbar support. Even though the Atlas has an adjustable lumbar support, I find it to be a bit too aggressive and pokey since it's made entirely of hard plastic with no padding. That said, if you're someone who really likes pronounced lumbar support, then the Atlas is probably going to be the better option over the Velia. When it comes to the Recline, the Velia uses a weight-activated mechanism which automatically adjusts the recline tension based on the user's weight, so you don't need to do any manual adjustments. This makes it easier to use if you're someone who's not really used to dialing in your adjustments. It uses a Donati mechanism, so it's definitely high quality. In my experience, it works pretty well. I can comfortably use the chair in a partially reclined position, and it holds me in place, giving me that nice suspended feeling. It's also a smooth, deep recline, and you can lock the chair in a reclined position, which is good for lounging. That said, the one downside to these weight-activated mechanisms is that you don't really have any manual control over the tilt tension. I personally like to adjust the tilt tension pretty frequently depending on the situation, and I can't do that at all with this chair. And since the mechanism adapts to your weight, it can result in an inconsistent experience from person to person. You kind of just need to trust that it's doing its job. That said, it works pretty well for me personally, but your results may vary depending on your weight, body type, and personal preferences in how you like to recline. The armrests on the Velia are really good. You get full 4D adjustability with height, width, depth, and pivot adjustments. The adjustment ranges are really good, and the way they adjust almost reminds me of the Steelcase Leap and Amiya. And the good thing is that they go low enough so that you can get them out of the way and push your chair underneath your desk to save space. There's also a good amount of resistance to the adjustments, so I haven't had any issues with accidentally bumping them out of position. Now this is a huge improvement compared to the Atlas, where the adjustments are so loose that they would just slide around. As for build quality, they're made entirely of plastic with no metal components. That said, they're still pretty sturdy with little play, but not quite as sturdy as the Atlas that has metal arms. One thing I noticed is that the armrests are angled fairly far back. This is kind of the opposite of most chairs like the Atlas that actually have the arms positioned a bit too far forward. With these arms, it's more comfortable for resting your elbows on them, but not as good if you're someone who likes to rest your forearms on them, for example, like when you're typing. Now, overall, I much prefer them positioned this way as opposed to too far forward. On the Atlas, it can be a bit awkward to use them in certain positions, especially when you're reclining. Also, another good thing about the armrests on the Velia is that they're actually connected to the backrest, which means the arms will recline back with you. This makes them much more usable while you're reclining, so you don't get that awkward gap between the backrest and the armrest that you often find on other chairs. The arm pads on the Velia are really good. They're super soft and squishy and have a good amount of give to them. This is a huge improvement over the Atlas that has really hard and stiff arm pads. They're very comfortable to use, and you can really dig your elbows into them without any discomfort at all. The only thing I'll say is that the pads could be a little bit wider so that you'd have a little bit more surface area to work with, but that's just a minor nitpick. These are definitely some of the most comfortable arm pads I've used in a budget chair. The headrest on the Velia is only height adjustable, which is a bit strange because most headrests will at least have a pivot adjustment as well. This can make it a bit more difficult to get it in the proper position depending on how you're sitting and how you like to use the headrest. The Atlas actually has height, depth, and pivot adjustments, so it's definitely more versatile in this regard. The height adjustment range isn't the best either. It just doesn't go that high, so if you're on the taller end and like to have the headrest up against the back of your head, then this might not reach high enough. It's fine for me, but then again, I'm only 5'6", so I'm a bit shorter, so you can imagine what it would be like if you're a taller person. In terms of comfort, I think it's actually pretty decent. It has a nice curved shape that fits right into the curve of your neck, which is how I personally like to use the headrest. It uses the same mesh as the backrest. It's not the softest mesh and feels a bit coarse to the touch, but I didn't really notice it when I was resting my head on it. The mesh is nice and taut with good elasticity, so it provides good support, and you don't really need to worry about coming into contact with the plastic frame underneath. Now, one interesting thing about this headrest is how it actually flexes and moves around with you as you move your head around. When resting your head on it, you can actually see the headrest flex from side to side as you move your head. I found that this helped keep my head and neck in the middle sweet spot of the headrest, even when moving around, eliminating any contact with the plastic frame on the sides. However, the trade-off with this flexibility is that the headrest feels pretty cheap and flimsy. You can see as I flex the headrest, it kind of puts some stress on the connection point for the height adjustment. This could potentially be a point of failure over an extended period of time. Also, the thin plastic just doesn't feel as sturdy in general as other headrests that I've used. Now, while the flex is nice in certain situations, sometimes it just feels flimsy if you're really leaning back into it and applying pressure. Overall, I'd say this headrest is pretty good, but definitely has its flaws. Personally, I think it's pretty comfortable to use, but the lack of adjustability options can really make it difficult to get it into the right position depending on your height. Also, the build quality is a bit flimsy, so I kind of question the durability and longevity with extended use. I'd say the headrest on the Atlas is much better kind of across the board since you get better mesh, 3D adjustability, and just a more solid build quality. The COLAMY Velia comes in at around $270, but I'll have a coupon code down in the description that you can use to save some money. At this price point, I think this chair offers excellent value for under $300. It's just a really solid chair with good adjustability and comfort for the price. Now that said, I would say that the Atlas is still a better value due to the slightly better materials and build quality, but I actually think a lot of people will find the Velia to be more comfortable because of the seat and those armrests. But at the end of the day, both are excellent chairs for the price, and I don't think you can go wrong with either one. I think it really just comes down to which features are the most important to you. In terms of policies, you get a 3-year warranty and a 30-day money-back guarantee, which is pretty decent for a sub $300 chair. And I think the Velia can easily last 3 to 5 years with no issues at all, which makes it a pretty good investment. Now, as a reminder, I'm working with COLAMY to give away a Velia chair at the end of March for their 6-year anniversary. If you want a chance to win, all you need to do is subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a comment about what makes your ideal office chair.